Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear the word Sherpa, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, I think it's a very specific image.
It is. It's someone high on a mountain, probably Everest, a guide, an expert climber, carrying an enormous load.
Right. The word itself has become synonymous with this kind of superhuman resilience at high altitude.
And while that image is, a testament to their incredible skill, it really only scratches the surface. It's just one part of a much bigger story.
That's exactly what we want to do today in this deep dive. We want to get past that surface level idea.
The Sherpa people are an ethnic group with a history, a biology, and a spiritual identity that is so much deeper than just mountaineering.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to take a really structured look at their migration history, their unique biology, which is frankly incredible, their culture, and this modern paradox they live with.
A paradox of high-risk work colliding with a global industry. It's a fascinating story.
Let's start with the name itself, because it's so often misused, right? It's not just a job title.
Not at all. The word Sherpa actually tells you where they came from. It's from the Tibetan language.
Okay.
It's a combination of two words, shar, which means east, and pa, which means people.
So East people.
Exactly, the people of the East. It's a literal description of their origin.
Which means they came from Eastern Tibet.
Precisely. But today, their community is primarily based south of Tibet, in the highlands of Nepal. We're talking about places like the Solukhumbu district. That's their real heartland.
But they're not just in that one area, are they? The sources mention they're more dispersed.
Oh, absolutely. While Solukhumbu is central, you find significant communities in other parts of Nepal and also across the border in Tingri County in China, in Bhutan.
And in India, too, I saw.
Yes, particularly in Sikkim and northern West Bengal, around Darjeeling. It shows this long history of mobility across the Himalayas, but they've managed to maintain a really cohesive cultural identity.
And what about their language? If they came from Tibet, can they still communicate easily with, say, someone from Lhasa?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. Their language, also called Sherpa, is part of the Tibeto-Burman family, but it has evolved. It's actually unintelligible to a Lhasa Tibetan speaker.
So it's another marker of their distinct identity.
It is. The language, the culture, the religion, it all adapted and became uniquely theirs after they settled in their new homeland.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about that journey. This migration from Tibet wasn't just a short hop over the mountains.
No, this was a massive, centuries-long movement that really defines who they are. Their oral history is incredibly detailed about it.
So they're descended from nomads who settled in the Khumbu region, right around Everest.
Exactly, right on the border with what is now China. And their traditions name the 4 original clans that made the journey from a region in eastern Tibet called Kham.
I remember reading their names, the Minyakba, Timi, Lama Sherwa, and Chawa.
Those are the ones.
Yeah.
And from those 4 original clans, the community grew and diversified over centuries into more than 20 distinct groups.
And what's the timeline we're looking at for this migration?
The estimates place the main wave of migration sometime during the 13th and 14th centuries. So think about that. A medieval-era journey across the highest mountain range in the world.
And why? Why leave? The sources suggest there might have been some kind of conflict.
That seems to be a major factor. The thinking is that conflict related to the spread of Mahayana Buddhism in their original homeland might have pushed them to seek new territory.
But they weren't just looking for land, were they? There's a spiritual element to it.
A huge one. They were seeking Biul, these hidden sacred valleys. We'll get into that more in the culture section, but it was a spiritual quest as much as a physical migration.
So they arrive in Khumbu and they establish themselves pretty quickly, politically speaking.
They do. By the 15th century, the Khumbu Sherpas had a remarkable amount of autonomy. They were basically self-governing for hundreds of years.
But that changed in the 20th century.
It did. The modern world caught up. In the 1960s, tensions between Nepal and China grew, and the central government in Kathmandu started to exert much more control over these remote areas.
And that led to the creation of the national park.
Yes. In 1976, the whole Khumbu region was designated as Sagarmatha National Park. And that single act cemented tourism and mountaineering as the economic engine of the region.
It sets the stage for everything that follows.
It really does. It's the moment their ancient way of life becomes intertwined with this global high-stakes industry.
Okay, let's pivot from their history to their biology, because this is what allowed them to thrive in that environment. It's the science behind their resilience.
It's maybe the most incredible part of their story. Genetically, as you'd expect, they cluster very closely with Tibetan and Han populations.
Which confirms the migration story.
Right. But they also show genetic links to other Himalayan groups like the Rai and the Magars, which points to a long history of interaction in the region.
But the big story, the one that gets all the attention, is this so-called super athlete gene.
Yes, that's the nickname for a specific gene called EPAS1. Studies have found over 30 genetic factors that help them at high altitude, but EPS1 is the star player.
So for those of us who live at sea level, what's the problem that EPS1 solves? What happens to our bodies up there?
Well, when a lowlander goes to extreme altitude, the body senses the lack of oxygen hypoxia, and it basically panics.
Right. It tries to compensate.
It overcompensates. It floods the system with red blood cells and hemoglobin to try and carry more oxygen.
And that sounds like a good thing, but it's not.
It's actually very dangerous.
Yeah.
That process makes your blood incredibly thick, which raises the risk of strokes, blood clots, and the fluid buildup in the lungs and brain that defines severe altitude sickness.
So how does EPA1 change that for the Sherpa?
It's an efficiency regulator. Instead of overproducing hemoglobin, their bodies use the limited oxygen available far more efficiently. They don't have that dangerous blood-thickening response. Their system is just, it's calmer, it's better adapted.
And this isn't a recent thing. This adaptation goes way, way back.
Oh, thousands of years. Studies suggest this genetic blueprint has been around for something like 7,000 to 11,000 years. So this is deep, deep prehistory. It means the foundation for their high-altitude survival was laid long before they even migrated from calm. It's fundamental to who they are.
And when you look at their specific lineage, the male and female lines tell slightly different stories.
Right, they do. The paternal line, the Y chromosome, shows a very strong and clear link back to Tibetans. The DM174 haplogroup is the most common, which reinforces that direct migration history.
But the maternal side is more diverse.
Much more diverse. The mitochondrial DNA shows that in addition to the common Asian haplogroups, there are two subgroups that seem to be unique just to Sherpa populations.
A15C1 and C43B1.
Those are the ones. It suggests a more complex history on the maternal side, maybe incorporating other groups along the way.
And there was a bit of a debate in the research about a possible genetic link to the Indian subcontinent, wasn't there?
There was, yeah. A 2014 study suggested there might be a significant South Asian component, maybe up to 17%.
But that was later challenged.
It was. Follow-up studies in 2015 and 2017 concluded that the genetic sharing was actually pretty limited, and that the Sherpa are overwhelmingly Sino-Tibetan in origin. It's a good example of how science kind of, self-corrects over time to get to a clearer picture.
So this genetic advantage translates directly into their modern profession. Sherpa is a famous name because of mountaineering.
It's the perfect marriage of biology and expertise. They had this incredible physical head start, and then they layered on generations of experience and intimate knowledge of the mountains. Tenzing Norgay is the most famous example, of course.
Reaching the summit of Everest with Edmund Hillary in 1953.
And that one achievement really put them on the global map. It's why the word Sherpa became a kind of generic term for any high-altitude guide, regardless of their ethnicity.
It's become shorthand for expert.
Exactly. And it's not just the EPAS1 gene. There's speculation about other things, like how they produce double the nitric oxide, which helps with circulation. It all adds up to this incredible endurance.
Which brings us right to the heart of the paradox. That advantage puts them directly in the most dangerous place on the mountain. The Khumbu Icefall.
The icefall is a monster. It's not just ice. It's a moving glacier, a frozen waterfall that shifts several feet every single day. It's inherently unstable.
And it's filled with these things called seracs. What are those exactly?
A serac is a huge, towering block of glacial ice. Think of a skyscraper made of ice that could collapse at any moment without any warning. The icefall is a minefield of them.
Which is why they have to travel through it at night when it's colder and a bit more stable.
Right. It adds another layer of difficulty to an already insane task.
But the most shocking part of this is the imbalance of risk. How many times does a Sherpa cross it compared to a paying client?
The number is just staggering. A Sherpa guide, because they're carrying all the gear, the tents, the food, the oxygen, they will cross the Khumbu Icefall about 30 times in a single season.
30 times. And the client?
The international client will cross it maybe twice. 3 times, max. And they're doing it on ropes and ladders that the Sherpas have already set up and checked repeatedly.
So the Sherpa community is absorbing virtually all of the risk.
100% of the catastrophic risk. for an industry that generates hundreds of millions of dollars.
Let's talk about that money. What does a Sherpa guide actually earn for taking on that level of danger?
Typically, a guide can make somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 for a 2 to 3 month season.
Which, to be fair, is a very good income in the context of Nepal's economy.
It's a massive income. It's why they do it. It can support an entire family for a year. But then you compare that to the $300 million the Everest industry brought to Nepal in 2019.
So they're getting a tiny fraction of the total profit while taking on almost all the physical risk.
That's the brutal math.
Right.
And that imbalance is what exploded into a crisis after the 2014 avalanche.
That tragedy really changed the conversation.
It had to. On April 18, 2014, a huge serac broke off and triggered an avalanche in the icefall. 16 Nepalese Sherpa guides were killed almost instantly.
And the detail from the sources that always stuck with me is what they were carrying. It wasn't emergency gear.
No. They were carrying clients' luxury items, extra gear, nice food. It highlighted that they died doing what was essentially commercial labor, not as part of a heroic climb.
And then came the government's response.
Which was, frankly, an insult. The government offered the families of the deceased about 40,000 rupees. That's around $400.
$400 for a life lost in a multi-million-dollar industry.
The anger was immediate and profound. The remaining Sherpas at base camp went on strike.
They shut the season down. What were they demanding?
Better working conditions, better insurance, and just basic respect from the government. They were furious. They debated canceling the entire season.
And there was that one quote that just captured the spiritual devastation of it all.
Yes, they said this route has become a graveyard. And then they asked, how could we walk over their bodies?
It wasn't just a labor dispute, it was a spiritual crisis.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, you had some of the foreign clients who'd paid a fortune complaining about their climb being ruined. It just laid the whole power dynamic bare.
And the tragedies kept coming. The 2015 earthquake killed 10 more Sherpas at base camp.
The numbers are just horrific. Between 1921 and 2018, 118 Sherpas died on Everest. They make up about a third of all deaths on the mountain. Their greatest strength has become their greatest vulnerability.
To understand that statement, how could we walk over their bodies? We have to dive into their spiritual life. It's all connected.
It is. Their faith is primarily the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, which is the oldest school founded by Guru Rinpoche.
And what's unique about the Nyingma tradition?
It has a strong mystical streak, but most importantly, it incorporated the local pre-Buddhist shamanistic religion, which is called Bun.
So it's a blend of formal Buddhism and this older indigenous spirit world.
Precisely. They believe that mountains, caves, rivers, they're all inhabited by gods and demons. These are living, sacred landscapes that have to be respected and appeased.
And their spiritual leadership reflects that blend, too. It's not just monks.
Not at all. You have the village lamas, who can be monks or married householders. But you also have Lawa, who are shamans that deal with spirit possession, and Mindung, who are soothsayers. They all play a role.
And the center of religious life is the Gompa, the temple.
Right, the village temple or monastery. And these are everywhere in the Solukhumbu region. It's the physical heart of their faith.
This all brings us back to the conflict with tourism. The reason they migrated in the first place was spiritual.
It was. They were searching for those Bayul, the hidden sacred valleys. The land itself is their refuge.
So when they look at Mount Everest, they don't see the world's highest mountain.
No, they see Chamalinga.
The mother of the world.
Exactly. And Mount Makalu is the deity Shankar. These aren't just piles of rock and ice. They are powerful deities. To climb them without permission is a profound violation.
And the actions of tourists, even small ones, can be a huge offense.
A huge one. A common problem is tourists cutting down trees for firewood. For the Sherpa, that's not just damaging the environment, it's violating a sacred being. It's an offense against the deity of that place.
And is there any way for them to protect this sacred landscape through the official channels?
They try. There are buffer zone groups where Sherpa leaders can voice their concerns to the park managers.
But they don't have any real power.
No. The final say always rests with the central government in Kathmandu, where the economic incentive of tourism usually wins out over local spiritual concerns.
It's a constant tension. Let's look at their more day-to-day culture. The details of their clothing and homes tell such a rich story.
They do. The traditional clothing is very similar to Tibetan wear, made from thick wool or sheepskin. For men, the main garment is the chuba, a long robe.
And it's tied with a sash that creates a sort of built-in pouch.
Exactly. The Kara sash forms a pouch called a namdok, which is incredibly practical for carrying small things.
And the women's clothing is very colorful.
Very. They wear a long dress called a tongkok, But the most iconic parts are the striped aprons, the pangdon in the front, and the gywi in the back. They're a real marker of their cultural identity.
Though, like everywhere, modernization is creeping in.
It is. Factory-made materials are replacing the homespun wool, and Western clothes are common now for daily wear.
Their housing also has this deep sense of community built into it.
It really does. Homes are built of stone, and the architecture is perfectly adapted to the terrain. But the most amazing part is how they're built.
It's a community effort.
A total community effort. When a new house is needed, neighbors all pitch in with labor, food, and drinks. It's a system of reciprocity that binds the village together. And the houses themselves are passed down through the family, not usually sold.
And this communal spirit is also formalized in their social gatherings, this tradition of yangzi.
Yes, a yangzi is a party, but it's more than that. It's a social investment. A host throws a party to gain favor and goodwill with their neighbors, with the expectation that it will be returned later.
And there's a strict social code, even down to where you sit.
Oh, absolutely. The seating arrangement is very rigid. Higher status guests sit near the fireplace, the place of honor. Lower status guests sit closer to the door.
And women are seated in the center.
Generally, yes, without that strict hierarchy. It's actually considered polite to sit in a lower position than you deserve, so the host can publicly honor you by inviting you to move up. It's a very structured social dance.
It's a mechanism for keeping the community strong.
Exactly. It reinforces the social bonds that are essential for survival in such a harsh environment.
So what does this all mean when we connect all these dots? What's the big picture?
The big picture is a story of, I think, incredible endurance. You have this profound genetic adaptation that lets them live where others can't. And that is woven into this deep spiritual connection to their homeland.
But now that ancient blueprint, both biological and spiritual, is in a direct collision course with this massive global industry.
They're forced to use their genetic gift to risk their lives on sacred ground, on routes they've called graveyards, to fuel an economy that, well, that often doesn't fully value their sacrifice.
And yet, amidst all that risk and that paradox, the level of individual achievement is just staggering.
It's off the charts. You have to mention them by name. Tenzing Norgay, who started it all. Kami Rita, who has climbed Everest more times than anyone in history.
Lakpa Sherpa, the most accomplished female Everest climber. And the next generation, like Nimarenji, the youngest to climb all 14 of the world's highest peaks.
Their achievements are a testament to their mastery, but they also highlight the terrible cost the community has paid.
Which leaves us with this core tension for their future, this clash between their spiritual view of Chomolingma, the mother of the world, and the economic necessity of selling access to her.
And that's the provocative thought to leave you with. Can they maintain that spiritual integrity? Can they protect their sacred landscape when their survival depends on an industry that sees the mountain as a product to be sold?
What is the price a community like this has to pay for economic survival in the modern world? Is walking over bodies on sacred ground a permanent cost of doing business?
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we transform complex research into actionable knowledge, giving you a comprehensive shortcut to being brilliantly informed. Today we're plunging into one of the most fundamental concepts in, well, all of life sciences, and maybe surprisingly, even engineering and sociology. We're talking about homeostasis. We've got your curated sources here, textbooks, articles, notes, all defining and detailing this powerful biological imperative. So our mission today is to get past that textbook definition, to really understand how living systems maintain this incredibly steady internal environment, even when the outside world is just complete chaos. Okay, let's unpack this.
And internal balance is absolutely the key phrase there. I think to really appreciate it, we have to go back a bit, historically.
Okay.
The whole idea that the body keeps its internal fluids constant, he called it the milieu intérieur, the internal environment, that was first described by the French physiologist Claude Bernard.
Right, back in the 1800s.
1849, yeah. And he saw that this constancy was the essential condition for a free and independent life.
So Bernard saw the result, the stability, but he didn't give it the name we all know today.
No, that counts later. The actual word homeostasis was coined by an American physiologist, Walter Bradford Cannon, in 1926. And he combined the Greek homoios for similar and stasis for standing still But he was really clear that it wasn't static. It's about stability through change.
That's a huge distinction. It's not a locked-in value. It's a constantly defended average.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, well, think about Joseph Barcroft, who said in 1932 that this stable internal environment is the absolute prerequisite for higher brain function.
For our brains to even work properly.
Exactly. The brain is so sensitive to changes in oxygen, pH, temperature, glucose, you name it. Without homeostasis keeping everything just right, complex thought it breaks down. So it all ultimately serves the brain.
That really raises the stakes.
So how does this whole machine actually work? Your sources all point to three sort of core components. Yeah, you can break down the fundamental control system into a loop that's always running. First, you have the receptor.
The sensor.
The sensor, the monitor, yeah. It detects the change. It could be a shift in temperature, CO2, whatever. Think of thermoreceptors in your skin.
And it's sensing an error, right? A deviation from the ideal state.
Which brings us to the second part. The control center. This is usually in the brain or a specific gland, like the hypothalamus or the pancreas. It gets the signal from the receptor, processes it, and this is the important part. It sets the maintenance range, the acceptable upper and lower limits.
So if the measurement from the sensor is outside that range...
And the control center signals the third component, the effector. Right. And that's the target. It can be a muscle, a gland, an organ, and its job is to act to reverse that initial change.
And the whole genius of this is that it's a self-correcting loop. It relies on negative feedback.
Absolutely. The goal is always to reduce the error. So once the effector does its job and brings things back into range, that success is signaled back to the control center.
And it tells it to stop.
It tells it to stop. The negative feedback shuts the system off. If it were positive feedback, it would just keep escalating, which is, a disaster in this context.
Okay, so with that loop, establish receptor, control center, effector, and feedback. Let's get into the classic examples. Temperature and energy. We can start with thermoregulation.
Thermoregulation is the one everyone knows, but it immediately shows you that the body isn't aiming for one single fixed number.
That's a great point. We all hear 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 Fahrenheit, and it sounds like this absolute target.
But it's not. First, the set point itself has a natural circadian rhythm. It's lowest when you're deeply asleep, say between 2 and 6 a.m., and then it peaks in the late afternoon. That daily swing is totally normal.
And the control center, the hypothalamus, can actually override this set point on purpose.
Exactly. Like during an infection, your immune cells release these things called pyrogens, which basically tell the hypothalamus to crank up the thermostat. That's a fever.
So your body then thinks its normal temperature is too cold.
Precisely. It thinks 37 is too cold compared to the new set point of, say, 39. So it triggers all the cold response mechanisms, like shivering, to get you up to that new higher temperature to fight the infection.
So let's talk about those mechanisms. When you're genuinely too cold, what's happening under the skin?
The first and fastest response is intense vasoconstriction. The blood vessels near your skin and in your limbs get much narrower.
To keep the warm blood away from the surface.
Right. It minimizes heat loss to the environment. It's why your fingers and toes get cold first. But then there's this other brilliant system in the limbs.
The countercurrent exchange.
The countercurrent exchange. It's a marvel. The cold blood returning to your core travels in deep veins that are wrapped right around the warm arteries going out.
So the heat just transfers over.
It passively transfers. The outgoing arterial heat gets short-circuited straight into the returning venous blood. It warms it up before it ever gets back to the core, saving a massive amount of energy.
And if that's not enough,
then the hypothalamus calls for more heat production. First, through non-shivering thermogenesis, basically revving up your metabolism. And if that still doesn't work, you get the last resort, shivering, those involuntary muscle contractions.
Okay, let's flip it. What about overheating?
The effectors engage immediately. First, vasodilation, the opposite of constriction. Blood vessels widen to flush heat to the skin. Then, the sweat glands get stimulated by what are called cholinergic sympathetic nerves.
And that detail is important. Why?
Well, sympathetic nerves usually use norepinephrine, but for sweat glands, they use acetylcholine. It's a little quirk. The sweat evaporates, and that is an incredibly effective way to cool down.
But not all animals sweat like we do.
No. Many other vertebrates, like dogs, use panting. That rapid, shallow breathing increases evaporation from the mucous membranes in the mouth and throat. It pulls a lot of heat away.
Now, before we move on, we have to touch on the allostasis. We've been talking about these automatic internal responses.
Right, but allostasis brings behavior into it. It's about achieving stability through change, and a huge part of that is just changing your behavior.
Like seeking shade or putting on a jacket.
Exactly. In extreme situations, that behavioral response is way more important than the physiological one because it's faster and it's energetically cheaper. There's a real cost to constantly running those internal stress responses.
That's called allostatic load, right?
Allostatic load. If you stay in a bad environment, your body pays a price. Allostasis is the idea that the body is smart enough to say, hey, let's change the environment before we break the internal machinery.
That's a profound way to look at it. Okay, let's shift to our second classic case. Blood glucose regulation. This one has to be so precise.
Oh, it's exquisitely balanced. The control center is in the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, and it's this amazing hormonal duel.
Between insulin and glucagon.
Right. When your blood sugar rises after a meal, the beta cells detect it and secrete insulin. At the same time, they actually inhibit the neighboring alpha cells from releasing glucagon.
So insulin is the signal to store all this new fuel. Where does it go?
Well, insulin is the key that lets glucose into most of your body's cells. In the liver, it slams the brakes on glucose production and tells the liver to start storing it as glycogen.
And if the glycogen stores are full?
Then the liver converts the excess glucose into triglycerides, packages them into something called VLDL, and sends them out into the blood to be stored in fat cells.
What about in muscle and fat cells themselves? How does the glucose get in so fast?
That's the GLUT4 transporter. It's a special protein. Normally, it's just sitting inside the cell. But when insulin binds to its receptor on the cell surface, it signals for all these GLUT4 transporters to move to the cell membrane.
So it basically opens up thousands of little doors for glucose.
Exactly. It creates this massive, rapid influx of glucose out of the blood and into the cells, clearing the sugar very quickly.
And if blood sugar drops too low, that's glucagon's job.
That's the panic signal.
Oh.
Glucagon from the alpha cells targets the liver and tells it to release its stored energy. It does that in two ways. One is glycogenolysis, just breaking down that stored glycogen back into glucose. The other is gluconeogenesis.
Meaning new creation of glucose.
Right. It creates new glucose from other things like lactate from your muscles, or even by breaking down protein, the amino acids, to make sure the brain gets the sugar it needs.
And your sources point out this really interesting detail about muscle glycogen versus liver glycogen.
Yeah, it's all about prioritization. Muscle glycogen is a private fuel tank just for that muscle's use. The muscle actually lacks the enzyme to release that glucose back into the blood.
But the liver is the public utility.
The liver is the public utility. Its job is to maintain blood sugar for everyone else, especially the brain. It just shows you the incredible coordination happening across different organs.
Okay, we've covered temperature and sugar. Now let's get into the really interconnected web fluid, pressure, electrolytes. Here's where it gets really interesting.
They are completely inseparable. I mean, maintaining arterial blood pressure, or ABP, is just central. If it's too low, you don't get perfusion. Too high, and you damage all your blood vessels.
So where are the sensors for this?
The main ones are stretch receptors, called baroreceptors. You find them in the wall of the aortic arch and in the carotid sinuses, which are these little bulges in the arteries going to your brain.
And they're just sensing how much the artery is stretching.
Exactly. And the response is almost instantaneous. It's our fastest homeostatic loop. The signal goes straight to the medulla oblongata in the brainstem.
And what does a medulla do?
If pressure is rising, too much stretch, it immediately slows the heart rate, that's bradycardia, and it tells the arterioles to relax and widen. Both things drop the pressure.
And if pressure falls, like when you stand up too fast?
The baroreceptors signal less stretch. The medulla flips to the sympathetic system. You get a faster heart rate, tachycardia, and the arterioles constrict.
And if it's a really severe drop?
Like from an injury, yeah. Then you get a massive sympathetic response that triggers the release of epinephrine adrenaline, which causes severe vasoconstriction everywhere to protect the heart and brain.
And that's the key insight, right? Heart rate itself isn't what's being controlled.
No, it's just an effector. It's a tool the body uses to fix an error in blood pressure. The body isn't aiming for a specific heart rate. It's using heart rate to keep pressure stable.
Which brings us to the kidneys and the famous renin-angiotensin system.
Yeah.
This is where salt and pressure really connect.
They do, and it's a fantastically complex system. The main sensor is in the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the kidney.
Okay, but it's not sensing sodium in the blood directly, is it?
No, and that's the genius of it. It's sensing the sodium concentration in the renal tubular fluid that's about to become urine.
Why there?
Because the amount of sodium that gets to that point is a proxy for your overall blood volume and pressure. If sodium delivery is low, the kidney interprets that as a low volume and triggers the alarm.
And that alarm is the release of an enzyme called renin.
Correct. Renin gets into the blood, and it finds a protein called angiotensinogen, and it cleaves it into angiotensin the first.
Which is still inactive.
It's just a precursor. The magic happens when angiotensin flows through the lungs. There's an enzyme there, ACE angiotensin-converting enzyme, that converts it into the active hormone angiotensin II.
And ACE is the target for a whole class of blood pressure drugs.
A huge class. ACE inhibitors, they block that conversion, they block the formation of angiotensin II, and that lowers blood pressure by preventing all the downstream effects.
So what are those effects? What does angiotensin II do?
It has two huge jobs. First, it is an incredibly potent vasoconstrictor. It clamps down on arterioles everywhere and jacks up blood pressure immediately.
And the second job?
The second job is to tell the adrenal cortex, the little gland on top of the kidney, to release another hormone, aldosterone.
And aldosterone is all about the electrolytes.
It acts on the kidney tubules, and its job is to reabsorb sodium back into the blood. And where sodium goes, water follows. But it does this in exchange for secreting potassium into the urine.
So it saves salt, but gets rid of potassium.
Exactly. It's vital for preventing sodium loss, but your sources are right to stress that it can't create new salt. You still have to eat salt to fix a deficiency. Aldosterone just stops you from losing more.
Okay, that covers salt and pressure. What about just pure water balance? Osmoregulation.
For that, we look at plasma osmolality, how concentrated your blood is. The sensors, the osmoreceptors, are in the hypothalamus.
And what are they responding to?
They respond to the fact that when you lose water, like through sweat, you usually lose more water than salt. So the fluid left behind gets more concentrated, more hypertonic.
The cells in the osmoreceptor literally shrink a little bit.
They do. And that shrinkage is the trigger. The hypothalamus then releases vasopressin, which you probably know as ADH, antidiuretic hormone.
And ADH tells the kidneys to save water.
It goes to the collecting ducts of the kidney and causes them to insert these little water channels called aquaporins into their membranes. This makes the tubules super permeable to water, so it gets reabsorbed back into the blood instead of being lost as urine.
But again, the kidneys can only conserve water. They can't make it.
Exactly, which is why the second and arguably more important effector is behavioral. The hypothalamus also stimulates the nearby thirst center.
You have to drink.
You have to drink. That's the only way to correct the deficit. And this raises that important question. How do all these systems cooperate? You have aldosterone managing sodium and ADH managing water concentration. They're separate mechanisms with separate sensors, but they have to work together perfectly to keep that internal environment stable. It's just incredible.
So we've seen how elegant these systems are. Let's talk about what happens when they fail. And also how these ideas have spread way beyond biology. So what does this all mean?
Well, when homeostasis fails, you get disease. It's that simple. And the failure can happen anywhere in the loop.
The classic example being type 1 diabetes.
Right. In type 1, the control center, the beta cells in the pancreas, is destroyed. The sensor works fine, but the effector hormone, insulin, is just gone. So you get chronic high blood sugar, hyperglycemia, and all the damage that comes with it.
What about something less common, like a problem with calcium regulation?
Oh, that's a fascinating one. Calcium is controlled by parathyroid hormone, or PTH. If you get a tumor that overproduces PTH, your plasma calcium goes way up.
And why is that so dangerous?
Because high calcium messes with the electrical properties of every cell. It changes how ion channels and receptors work, making nerves and muscles less excitable.
So it's not just about bones.
No, you get bone loss and fractures, sure, but you also get severe lethargy, muscle weakness, and these classic psychological symptoms, depression, and what they call labile emotions. Your whole system is destabilized.
And then there's the idea of decompensation in chronic disease.
Right. This is when the body's compensatory mechanisms just give out. For years, your body might compensate for something like heart failure. The heart muscle gets thicker, the kidneys adjust fluid, but that compensation puts a strain on everything.
And eventually it breaks.
Eventually it breaks. The heart wears out, the kidneys fail, and you get this rapid worsening of symptoms. The body has run out of tricks to maintain balance.
Which is really, I guess, a microcosm of aging.
It is. Aging is fundamentally a loss of homeostatic capacity. The control systems get slower, less precise. That leads to an unstable internal environment and makes you much more vulnerable to any kind of stress.
Okay, so let's flip from failure to foresight. The sources talk about predictive homeostasis. This is anticipation, not just reaction.
This is where biology gets really clever. It's about responding to an expected challenge. The best example is back with blood sugar.
Okay.
When you eat a meal, even before the sugar is absorbed, your gut releases hormones called incretins.
And these go to the pancreas.
They go to the pancreas and stimulate insulin secretion in anticipation of the glucose that's coming. So by the time the sugar hits your blood, insulin is already there waiting for it, which dampens the spike.
But that's a guess, right? It's an open loop system.
That is the critical distinction. It's an open loop system. It's based on guesswork. And that's why you still absolutely need the classic reactive closed loop negative feedback system to stand by and correct any errors. The anticipatory system makes a guess, but the actual blood sugar level provides the final precise correction.
And this whole idea of a self-correcting loop, it's obviously not just in biology.
Oh, it's everywhere in engineering. It's the basis of control theory. A thermostat in your house is a perfect homeostatic system.
Sensor, control center, effector.
Yep. The sensor detects the temperature, the control center has the set range, and the effector is the heater or the air conditioner. It runs until negative feedback reaching the right temperature shuts it off.
Cruise control in a car.
Same thing. The speed is the regulated variable. The sensor detects you're slowing down on a hill. The control system tells the effector the throttle to give it more gas.
But the most surprising application for me was risk homeostasis. This is about human psychology.
It's a powerful concept. It says that when you make an environment objectively safer, people often compensate by behaving more riskily to keep their own personal feeling of risk at a constant, comfortable level.
Like with anti-lock brakes on cars.
That's the famous example. The car is safer, but early studies showed drivers with ABS didn't necessarily have better safety records. Why? Because the ABS system removed the negative feedback of a terrifying skid.
So they felt safer and drove a little faster or followed a little closer.
Exactly. They unconsciously traded that extra margin of safety for better performance, keeping their perceived risk level the same. They just moved the boundary of where the negative feedback kicks in.
Which leads to the really big picture idea of societal homeostasis.
Applying this to whole cultures or even systems of knowledge. Think about the constant tension between individual rights and public good. Society is always adjusting laws and norms to try and maintain some kind of equilibrium there.
And Jean-Francois Lyotard talked about this in Science Itself, the idea of stress homeostasis.
Yeah, he argued that established scientific fields are governed by this principle. They resist stress. When a truly radical new idea comes along, it creates intellectual stress because it destabilizes the accepted norms, the set point.
So resisting a new discovery isn't always about being malicious. It's just the system trying to maintain its own stability.
It's the system's drive to maintain its comfortable state of knowledge. It will try to ignore or marginalize the new idea until the evidence is so overwhelming that the set point has to be reset.
Wow. So we've gone from molecules all the way to sociology. It's the same fundamental principle of self-correction.
It is. From gene regulation at the micro level all the way up to these huge complex systems, it's all about that drive towards dynamic equilibrium.
This deep dive has really shown that the body isn't just a machine. It's this incredible self-correcting republic of systems all working together. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from the research. We've just marveled at the body's precise control systems. Instant blood pressure correction, minute-by-minute calcium changes, razor-sharp temperature control. And yet, the sources specifically say that the body's mechanisms for regulating weight homeostasis seem to struggle. They struggle to correct for energetic errors, for short-term calorie surpluses or deficits. So given all these other finely tuned controls we've discussed, why is energy balance the one system where our ancient biology seems to struggle so much to adapt to our modern world? Is it a flaw in a system that was built for an environment of scarcity? Or maybe the system is just designed to average things out over years, not the short term we focus on for our health goals. Something for you to consider the next time you try to adjust your own internal set point. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the interconnected systems that keep you alive, alert, and functional. Keep exploring the science and keep questioning the balance. Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into what might be the highest stakes engineering challenge humanity has ever really faced, planetary defense. And forget the dramatic movie tropes. we're looking at the highly complex real-world effort to protect Earth. Not with, massive missiles, but with precision orbital mechanics and kinetic impactors.
It's truly a watershed moment in space history, and I think you, our listener, will likely remember the spectacular success of NASA's DART mission.
The Double Asteroid Redirection Test, right?
Exactly. That was the moment we proved we could, in fact, hit a very small target in deep space and measurably change its trajectory. It was a massive foundational success for the whole concept of kinetic deflection.
But a successful collision is only the first chapter in this story. I mean, to be truly prepared, we can't just rely on a one-off successful punch. We need validation.
That's the key word.
We need the quantifiable data to turn a scientific proof of concept into a reliable, repeatable engineering tool. And that is the singular critical mission of the European Space Agency's incredible spacecraft, Hera.
Right. And Hera is so much more than just a post-impact cleanup crew. It is the world's first dedicated validation mission designed to understand the fundamental physics that, underpinned DART's success. It's the cornerstone mission of ESA's new and vital space safety program.
And its destination is the binary asteroid system, 65803 Didymos.
Yes, where its little moon, Dimorphos, now bears the scar of that 2022 collision.
So our mission today is to become expert witnesses to this validation process. We need to go back and really understand the fraught history of this project, how it nearly died before it was resurrected as Hera.
It was a very close call.
And then we have to analyze exactly what instruments this incredibly sophisticated spacecraft is carrying, because they're designed not just to look at the crater, but to literally, X-ray the asteroid's internal structure.
In a way, yes. It's a kind of radar X-ray. And this knowledge is what separates an educated guess from a guaranteed planetary protection strategy. The difference between DART and Hera is, it's like the difference between proving a gun fires and proving exactly how powerful the bullet is. We're moving from just observing deflection to scientifically validating how and why that deflection works so efficiently.
And that transition is what makes this deep dive so crucial to understanding humanity's future in space. The story of Hera, it doesn't really begin in a lab in 2019. It starts much earlier, rooted in a concept of global collaboration.
Right.
The initial joint concept established way back in 2013 was known as AIDA.
AIDA, the Asteroid Impact and Deflection Assessment.
So what was that?
AIDA was a beautiful two-pronged approach. It really showcased international cooperation at the highest level of space science.
And it was designed to target the Didymos system from the very beginning.
From the start. And that was because its binary nature. A large asteroid, Didymos, with a smaller moonlet, Dimorphos, orbiting it, that makes measuring the impact effects much easier. Well, if you change Dimorphos's orbit around Didymos, that period change is quickly and clearly measurable from Earth. It's much easier than trying to see a tiny change in the trajectory of a single asteroid against the background of space.
Makes sense. And the roles in AIDA were clearly defined, right?
Oh, very clearly. NASA was responsible for the muscle, the DART impactor itself, the thing that would accelerate and smash into Dimorphos.
And ESA's role was the brain.
The brain, exactly. The AIM, or Asteroid Impact Mission Orbiter. AIM's job was, arguably the most scientifically critical part of AIDA. It was supposed to arrive at Didymos first to provide the definitive before picture.
So it would measure everything.
Yeah.
The mass, shape, rotation.
Yeah.
All of it.
All of it. The surface composition of Dimorphos before the collision. Then it would witness the impact in real time and monitor the immediate aftermath.
That would have been amazing data.
It would have allowed scientists to calculate the momentum transfer with just unprecedented accuracy. That twin mission approach. It was the ideal way to capture the entire physical process.
But space missions, especially ones that require complex international funding, they rarely go according to the ideal plan.
Unfortunately, no. Despite the technical readiness of the concept, the AIDA plan hit a catastrophic financial snag. Towards the end of 2016, ESA announced it had to abandon the development of the AIM orbiter.
That must have been a devastating setback for the whole planetary defense community. Why specifically did AIM get grounded?
It really came down to insufficient financial support from ESA's member states.
Money, again.
It's almost always money. While the technical value was, universally recognized, securing the significant financial commitments, we're talking millions of euros that were needed to develop and fly a deep space orbiter in that time frame, it just proved impossible.
Planetary defense wasn't a high enough priority back then.
For some nations, no. It was still viewed as a lower priority compared to other space science or, say, telecommunications endeavors. Without that sufficient backing, the mission was shelved.
So ESA dropped out of the partnership, but NASA kept DART going. I have to wonder, if AIM was supposed to provide the vital before and during measurements, why did DART proceed solo? Wouldn't that leave a massive gap in the physics data?
That's a great question, and it speaks to the high priority of proving the kinetic concept itself. NASA scientists recognized that the ability to actually perform the maneuver to autonomously navigate, hit that small target, and demonstrate any orbital change was paramount.
So they decided a partial success was better than no mission at all.
Exactly. They relied on terrestrial observatories to partially take over the measuring role, and those teams did perform impressively well. They were able to measure the change in orbital period after the impact.
But they couldn't get the intimate details, could they?
No, I mean, ground-based telescopes, even the very largest ones, they just cannot provide the spatial resolution needed to map the crater or measure the precise volume of ejected material or, crucially, determine the exact mass and internal structure of that small, irregularly shaped dimorphous moonlet.
So we proved that we could do it, but we left that why it worked so well largely unanswered.
Perfectly put.
And speaking of DART's success, let's just briefly set the scene for Hera's arrival. DART launched in November 2021, and in a really incredible display of astronomical precision, collided with Dimorphos on September 26, 2022.
And smashed into it at a velocity of about 6.6 kilometers per second.
Just a staggering speed.
It was a truly spectacular event. And we weren't entirely without close-up documentation thanks to the Italian space agency's Liscia cube.
Right, the little nanosatellite.
Yes, this small nanosatellite deployed by DART just before impact, it zipped past and documented the first 100 seconds or so. It captured these incredible images of the massive plume of ejected debris.
And the debris plume, as we now know, was far more significant than anyone predicted.
Far more. But the exact physics remained a mystery. And that mystery, that gap in crucial scientific data, led directly to the renaissance of the European contribution.
So the mission was reborn.
Precisely. In the aftermath of AIM's cancellation, ESA realized the profound nature of the data they were missing. So in 2017, they decided to resume studies, which ultimately led to the formal proposal and creation of the Hera mission.
Named after the Greek goddess.
Consort of Zeus, yes. And Hera was designed specifically as the post-impact analyst, aiming to fulfill all of the original AIM objectives that ground-based instruments just couldn't touch.
So it was reborn not as the before orbiter, but as the after investigator.
Yes, and that required a far more advanced, more specialized payload. Hera was finally approved by the ESA Ministerial Council in November 2019. That really secured its place as the key validator for the space safety program.
And the money finally came through.
The money came through. The construction contract, awarded to a consortium led by OHB in September 2020, came in at a significant 129.4 million euros. This was a statement. Planetary defense is now a non-negotiable part of our long-term strategy.
You know, what's great about this historical context is that Hera is, in a way, fundamentally a stronger, more specialized mission because it missed the before picture.
How do you mean?
It forced its designers to include technology, like the penetrating radar we'll talk about, to reconstruct the asteroid's internal state after the impact.
That's a key observation. The constraints of the timeline forced innovation, ensuring that Hera is now carrying the necessary tools to answer the question DART left hanging. Not if we can do it, but how reliably we can do it, regardless of the asteroid's specific material properties.
Here's where it gets really interesting. DART was a spectacular shot, but Hera has to analyze the wound and write the medical report. Its core objective is scientific validation.
Absolutely.
So what scientific question is Hera primarily designed to answer?
The absolute primary objective is the planetary defense validation itself. We know DART changed Dimorphos' orbital period by 33 minutes.
Which was huge, right?
Right.
Way more than they expected.
Hugely more. It was significantly greater than the 7 to 10 minutes predicted by the initial models. And this deflection factor is quantified using what scientists call the momentum transfer enhancement factor, or the beta factor.
Let's pause on that beta factor, because that feels like the scientific heart of the mission. What exactly does it represent, and why did DART's performance confuse us?
The beta factor is essentially a ratio. It's the ratio of the total momentum actually transferred to the asteroid versus the initial momentum of the impacting spacecraft, DART.
Okay.
So if the asteroid were a monolithic, solid body like a bowling ball, the beta factor would be close to 1. The total deflection would just be the momentum of the spacecraft itself pushing it.
But DART's factor was estimated to be much higher, maybe closer to 3 to 5.
Exactly. Which means something else added momentum to the target.
The ejecta. The debris.
That something else was the colossal cloud of ejected debris, the shattered rock and dust streaming away from the impact site. When DART hit Dimorphos, it pulverized a massive amount of material. As this material rocketed away from the surface, it provided a significant secondary impulse, like a massive short-lived rocket engine firing on the opposite side of the impact site.
So the debris plume provided the majority of the overall deflection.
The vast majority. And if that ejecta plume provides the lion's share of deflection, we need to know the physics controlling it. Was it the low gravity, the material composition?
That's what Hera has to find out.
Precisely. Hera needs to determine how this efficiency, the beta factor, is dependent on the target's material properties. If an asteroid is dense and solid, a monolith, the ejecta plume might be minimal, low beta factor. But if it's a highly porous rubble pile,
A collection of weakly bound rocks and dust, riddled with internal voids.
then the impact will shatter and launch far more material, resulting in a high beta factor. This porosity, this internal structure, is the key variable that Hera is going to measure.
So we're not just studying how hard DART hit, we're studying the physical consequences of hitting a cosmic sandcastle versus a solid marble.
That's a perfect analogy. And furthermore, Hera has to analyze the energy partitioning. What proportion of DART's kinetic energy was absorbed by internal fragmentation and restructuring versus the kinetic energy carried away by that crucial ejected debris cloud?
Understanding that balance is the difference between a random success and a predictable engineered safety solution.
Absolutely.
And moving beyond just the defense validation, the mission also has enormous scientific objectives. We've never studied a binary asteroid up close after a human intervention.
No, never. The scientific bounty is huge. It starts with mapping Dimorphos. Hera will map the entire surface of the moonlet with a spatial resolution of a few meters.
But for the crater itself,
For the crater, it will focus its highest resolution imagery down to a razor-sharp 10 centimeters on the immediate vicinity of the impact.
10 centimeters. That means you can literally look at the scatter pattern of the ejecta and measure the size of individual chunks of rock that were launched into space.
A level of detail that is absolutely impossible from Earth. Secondly, mass measurement is paramount. To calculate that beta factor accurately, you need both sides of the equation. We need an extremely accurate, independent estimate of Dimorphos's mass.
And Hera is designed to provide this high-precision mass calculation.
Yes, through radioscience, which we'll get into. And the third major scientific objective, which is really the most innovative part of the mission, is characterizing the internal structure.
Getting beyond just guessing if it's a rubble pile.
To knowing definitively what's beneath the surface. Characterizing the subsurface and internal structure is where Hera truly breaks new ground. It is taking instruments specifically designed to probe the interior of a tiny celestial body that has never been done before.
Finally, the technological objectives. Hera isn't just a science vessel, it's a testbed for future deep space exploration.
Definitely. Especially for autonomous navigation around tiny, low-gravity objects.
The self-driving space car.
In a way, yes. The degree of independence the spacecraft must exhibit is just fascinating. It's operating millions of kilometers away. Radio signals take minutes to travel. So Hera is running guidance software that processes data from multiple sensors, its cameras, altimeters, to construct a continuous 3D model of its surroundings.
And it uses that model to independently define and adjust a safe trajectory.
A safe trajectory around a small asteroid, anticipating potential gravitational perturbations. It's basically training to be a fully self-driving space vehicle, capable of maneuvering in an environment where gravity is negligible and tiny errors can lead to immediate disaster.
Wow.
And the second major tech objective is proving that miniature science platforms are viable deep space assets. Hera is demonstrating the deployment of and continuous communication with its two tiny 12-kilogram CubeSats in the interplanetary environment.
Getting those miniature labs to function effectively millions of kilometers from Earth is a massive step forward for cost-effective space exploration.
So now that we fully appreciate the stakes, let's trace Hera's journey since it left Earth, because the mission began with a few dramatic twists right off the launch pad. The spacecraft lifted off on October 7, 2024.
And its launch was far from routine, right?
Yeah.
Using a Falcon 9 rocket, but with some unusual constraints.
It was a logistical scramble. Hera needed to use Space Launch Complex 40, SLC-40, at Cape Canaveral. Now, SLC-40 is typically used for Starlink and commercial launches.
And the prime site was busy.
Exactly. The prime site for these complex orbital injections, Launch Complex 39A, was tied up preparing for the imminent launch of NASA's Europa Clipper mission. Launch schedules are rigid, and Hera had to adapt.
I recall hearing about an issue with the Falcon 9 booster itself, too. That must have added to the tension.
It did. The launch occurred while the Falcon 9 fleet was technically under a temporary grounding order. There was a mishap, second-stage deorbit burn issue, during the preceding Crew 9 mission.
So how did they get permission to launch?
Well, because Hera was destined for a unique heliocentric orbit, an orbit around the sun, it posed a different risk profile. So the FAA granted a special waiver, recognizing the critical nature of the planetary defense mission.
So it took off as an exceptional mission, both scientifically and logistically, and the booster played its part.
Absolutely. The booster they used was highly flight-proven. It had already completed 22 previous missions. And to ensure Hera achieved the precise escape velocity it needed, the decision was made to expend the booster.
So they sacrificed recovery for performance.
They prioritized the mission's velocity requirements, yes.
Moving past the hectic launch, what were the first operational steps Hera took in deep space?
Within days of launch, while it was already over 1 million kilometers from Earth, Hera began rigorous testing of its main sensor suite. It activated the asteroid framing cameras, the thermal infrared imager, and the Hyperscout H imager.
And they pointed them back home.
They did. They pointed them back at Earth and the Moon, using them as massive, known calibration targets. This tested their sensitivity and accuracy at extreme range, which is crucial for later small-body tracking.
And the CubeSats, those miniature deep space explorers, were also given an early checkup.
Yes. Also in October 2024, the 2 CubeSats, Milani and Juventus, were briefly powered up. This was a critical technological proof point for ESA, confirming they could establish stable communications and confirm the health of these 12-kilogram assets.
And that was a first for ESA, right?
The first time ESA had successfully commanded and operated CubeSats in interplanetary space, a huge milestone.
And to set up the trajectory for the asteroid belt, Hera needed a massive boost. That meant the Mars gravity assist.
That gravity assist was the centerpiece of the cruise phase. After some preliminary burns, Hera performed its major deep space maneuver on October 27, 2024, firing its propulsion system for a full 100 minutes.
A 100-minute burn.
A 100-minute burn. It changed its velocity by 146 meters per second, putting it on course for that critical rendezvous with Mars.
Tell us about that crucial gravity assist, which happened in March 2025.
The assist was executed on March 12, 2025. Hera swooped in, passing within 5,000 kilometers of the Martian surface. That interaction provided the necessary gravitational slingshot.
Using Mars gravity to save fuel.
Exactly. It increased the spacecraft's velocity and shifted its orbital plane towards the main asteroid belt, all while conserving precious fuel.
But the team was smart. They didn't waste the opportunity. They used the flyby to perform a fantastic side mission involving Deimos.
It was an excellent piece of opportunistic science and engineering. As it approached Mars, Hera diverted slightly to observe Deimos, Mars's smaller, highly irregular moon. It imaged Deimos from a distance of 1,000 kilometers, with a closest approach of only 300 kilometers.
And that gave us invaluable new data on a P-type asteroid.
A very primitive, carbonaceous object that's notoriously difficult to image from Earth.
And maybe more importantly, that flyby was the ultimate stress test for the spacecraft's self-driving brain.
Absolutely. The main objective of the Deimos pass wasn't just pretty pictures, it was a comprehensive technology test. Hera's autonomous navigation software had to autonomously lock on to specific, subtle Martian features, impact craters, surface textures.
To practice for the main event.
By tracking those features precisely as the spacecraft sped past, the system fully tested the complex algorithms it will need to navigate the tiny, chaotic gravity field of the Deimos system years later. It was practice for the big game.
So once past Mars, Hera settled into the main asteroid belt cruise phase, continuing to calibrate its sophisticated instruments.
Indeed. The AFC cameras and spectral imagers had to prove their tracking capabilities. This involved sighting known asteroids like 1126, Otero, and 18805, Kellyday, from millions of kilometers away. This calibration ensures that when Hera begins tracking Didymos, its instruments are perfectly tuned.
And then came a completely unexpected cosmic event involving a visitor from outside our solar system.
This was a truly unique encounter in late 2025. Between October 25 and November 1st, Hera found itself passing directly through the extended cometary tail of the third known interstellar object, the comet designated 3 Iates.
Wow, crossing the wake of a cosmic tourist.
It's a scientific lottery win. While not a planned observation, the potential for Hera's instruments, particularly the dust sensors on the CubeSats, to analyze the composition of material originating from another star system is a monumental, if opportunistic, scientific bonus.
So after this eventful and successful cruise, the destination is finally in sight.
When does Hera get to work?
Due to the precision of the trajectory and the success of the maneuvers, the mission team was able to announce that Hera is slightly ahead of schedule. It's now projected to arrive at the Didymos system in November 2026.
A month earlier than originally planned.
A month early. The real science is about to begin.
Let's talk about the machinery that enables this deep dive. Hera itself is a remarkably robust piece of engineering, a box-shaped main bus. Right, about 1.6 by 1.6 by 1.7 meters. 2 large solar panels, a high-gain dish for communication. All told, its launch mass was over a ton, 1,128 kilograms.
And its propulsion system is key to its success near a low-gravity body.
Absolutely. It uses bipropellant chemical thrusters, which offer a total delta V, that's the capacity for velocity change, of about 1,300 meters per second. That large reserve is essential for the precise, frequent maneuvers needed to maintain a stable orbit around tiny Dimorphos.
An orbit where even sunlight can push you around.
Exactly. Solar radiation pressure can significantly affect the spacecraft's trajectory.
So let's look at the primary science payload. The main instruments, Hera's high-resolution eyes and hyper-accurate rulers.
First up, the core imaging system, the asteroid framing cameras, AFC. There are 2 redundant, identical cameras using the faint star sensor technology.
And they do 2 jobs.
2 jobs, yes. They provide the baseline physical characteristics of the surface, but more importantly, they are crucial for providing guidance data to the autonomous navigation software. Their spatial resolution is highly advanced.
How advanced?
They can achieve 1-meter resolution when Hera is still 10 kilometers away from the target. This allows the mission planners to construct extremely accurate 3D shape models very early in the rendezvous phase.
Next is the planetary altimeter, HAL-ELT. Why is a laser altimeter so critical when orbiting a body that barely has any gravity?
HAL-ELT is essentially Hera's independent distance monitor. It's a micro-LiDAR system. Near a body with practically no gravity, calculating your position based solely on gravity models is unreliable. You need constant, high-precision distance measurements.
And PAL-T provides that.
It provides altitude accuracy of 0.5 meter, feeding that data directly into the attitude guidance system to ensure Hera doesn't drift away, or worse, crash.
We also have 2 spectral tools that tell us about the asteroid's surface composition and temperature.
We do. First, HyperScout H. That's the hyperspectral imager. It captures images across 25 distinct spectral bands in the visible and near-infrared light. This helps us characterize the distribution of minerals on the surface.
And then we have the contribution from JAX, the Japanese Space Agency.
That's the thermal infrared imager. TRI observes the thermal output in the 714 micron range using 6 specialized filters.
And why is temperature so important?
Because it tells us about the asteroid's thermal inertia. A highly porous surface, like a rubble pile, heats up and cools down much faster than a solid rock. TRI measurements are a key indicator of surface porosity and help us cross-reference the internal structure data.
Okay, finally, the most non-visual but maybe the most important measurement. X-band radio science, XDST. This is how we get the mass data for the beta factor.
This technique is just exquisite. It leverages the precision of Earth-based deep space tracking stations. As Hera orbits Dimorphos, the tiny gravitational tugs from the asteroid slightly perturb the spacecraft's velocity.
A very slight change.
Incredibly slight. But this tiny change in velocity causes a measurable shift in the radio frequency, the Doppler effect, as the signal travels back to Earth. By meticulously tracking these subtle frequency changes, scientists can calculate the exact mass of both Didymos and Dimorphos.
And without that mass, the whole beta factor calculation falls apart.
It's meaningless. The measurement is absolutely foundational.
Now let's talk about the true innovators. The 2 CubeSats, Milani and Juventus. These aren't throwaways. They are essential, dedicated field labs.
They really are. Both are 6U XL nanosatellites about the size of a shoebox, weighing 12 kilograms each. They gather data in orbits that Hera can't safely sustain, and they act as part of the radio science experiment.
Let's start with Juventus, the geophysical specialist. It carries the instrument designed to answer that deep question of internal structure.
Juventus is the key to unlocking the rubble pile mystery. Its primary instrument is the Jura radar, operating at a frequency of 50-70 megahertz. This is revolutionary.
The first of its kind.
The first radar system designed specifically to penetrate and image the inner layers of an asteroid. It uses two 1.5-meter-long dipole antennas to transmit radio signals that reflect off internal boundaries, voids, fractures, buried large fragments.
So instead of just seeing the impact crater on the surface, Jura will actually see the structural damage inside the asteroid caused by DART.
Precisely. Or maybe the pre-existing structure that made it so fragile in the first place. It aims for a spatial resolution of 10 to 15 meters within the asteroid. This data is the direct link we need to confirm that high porosity leads to high deflection efficiency.
And its end-of-mission plan is one of the most exciting.
Oh, yes. After its orbital observations are complete, Juventus is slated to attempt a landing on Dimorphos. It's a sacrifice maneuver.
And it has accelerometers.
It does. So the moment of impact and the subsequent movement, whether it bounces, sinks, shatters, will provide the last unique piece of data, the direct mechanical properties of the asteroid's surface.
Moving on to Milani, named after the pioneering Italian scientist Andrea Milani. Its specialty is surface composition.
Milani is focused on chemical mapping and the dust environment. Its star instrument is the Aspect Hyperspectral Imaging Spectrometer, and this is far more powerful than the imager on the main bus. It operates across 72 channels.
72 channels. What does that buy us scientifically?
It allows for incredibly fine discrimination between different materials. A regular camera sees 3 primary colors. Aspect sees 72 shades of color, allowing scientists to differentiate subtle compositional differences between various types of silicates, minerals, and organic materials.
Creating definitive compositional maps.
Exactly. And its second tool is the Vista thermogravimeter. This device is specialized in detecting fine dust particles that might be lingering around the asteroid. And crucially, it will also search for volatiles like traces of water, ice, and light organic materials, providing a snapshot of the material history of this unique body. So, with this whole suite of hardware, from the radar that peers within to the spectrometers that analyze composition, Hera is set for its grand arrival in November 2026.
Which will be a historic first.
The first mission ever to make a dedicated rendezvous with a binary asteroid system.
And the investigation is a marathon, not a sprint. We're looking at a carefully structured 6-month campaign broken down into 5 distinct phases.
Yes, that 6-month timeline is tightly managed to ensure data redundancy and safety. The mission logically progresses from far-field assessment to high-resolution contact investigation.
Phase 1 is early characterization, lasting about 6 weeks. What are the key priorities there?
In Phase 1, Hera maintains a safe, distant orbit. The focus is establishing the fundamentals, determining the global shape models, fine-tuning the mass and gravity characteristics with radio science, and establishing the thermal and dynamical properties of both asteroids.
The foundational data is vital because it informs every subsequent close-up trajectory.
It does. If the shape or mass is different than expected, the entire close approach plan must be adjusted.
Once they have a stable baseline, Phase 2 is dedicated solely to payload deployment, a brief but critical 2-week period.
This is the moment Hera releases its tiny armada. The 2 CubeSats, Milani and Juventus, are carefully deployed into their planned orbits. This requires precise alignment and sequencing to ensure they're stabilized and their communication links are fully operational.
Success here is the difference between getting subsurface data and not.
Exactly. Then we move into the first period of intense measurement. Phase 3, detailed characterization, lasting 4 weeks.
And this is where the core mapping begins in earnest.
It is. Hera starts orbiting closer, performing meter-scale mapping of the entire surfaces. Critically, this is the first ramp-up of the interior exploration. Milani starts delivering detailed compositional data, and the groundbreaking internal structure data from the Juventus Jura radar begins to stream back.
Giving us our first look beneath Dimorphos' skin.
Our very first look.
The scientific climax must be Phase 4, close observation, a crucial 6-week period where they risk getting extremely close to the target.
Absolutely. This phase is zeroed in on the effect of the DART impact. It involves high-resolution investigations of a large fraction of Dimorphos' surface, culminating in the AFC cameras achieving that unprecedented 10-centimeter resolution directly over the impact scar.
They'll be able to analyze the precise dimensions of the DART crater.
The dimensions, the ejecta blanket, how the surface materials were physically shocked and altered by that hypervelocity collision, all of it.
And finally, Phase 5, the experimental phase, also 6 weeks long, concludes the primary mission.
This is the operational finale. It's dedicated to final high-risk maneuvers to capture unique, low-altitude vantage points for analysis. And this phase culminates with the planned sacrificial landing of the Juventus CubeSat onto Dimorphos.
That final contact will provide the last piece of unique mechanical data before Hera eventually completes its primary operations.
A fitting end to a 6-month scientific blitz.
So what does this all mean?
It means that Hera is the essential mission that bridges the gap between successful demonstration and reliable engineering. DART provided the proof of concept, but Hera provides the quantitative blueprint.
The actual user manual for deflecting an asteroid.
You could put it that way. The data it will deliver, the accurate mass, the internal structure, the detailed calculation of the momentum enhancement factor, those are the foundational requirements for engineering any future planetary defense missions with confidence.
So we needed DART to show us we could land the punch. We need Hera to tell us exactly what kind of damage that punch does, and more importantly, how to maximize that damage next time.
Exactly. Without Hera's forensic analysis, the deflection factor remains a high-stakes variable based on educated guesses about the target's internal composition.
And this raises a really profound question that Hera is designed to answer. We learned from DART that the impact was far more efficient than predicted, specifically because of the recoil created by the ejected material.
Which suggests that the internal composition, the porosity, the rubble pile nature, is a critical factor in deflection efficiency.
So the asteroid's internal architecture might be the single most important variable for a successful planetary defense mission.
It is, and that's our final provocative thought for you to consider. Hera is carrying the unique radar that will finally map that internal structure. If Hera confirms that high internal porosity guarantees a massive propulsive debris plume and thus a highly successful deflection, what implications does this have for the choice of targets in a real-world scenario?
Do future missions need to prioritize deflection methods based on whether the target is a rubble pile?
Or does Hera's data allow us to engineer solutions efficient enough to handle even solid monolithic asteroids? The answers beamed back in 2027 will redefine the rules of asteroid deflection forever.